And I said, you've got a quarter of the electorate that feels incredibly disenfranchised right now, and they hate the government, and they want the government to have nothing to do with them. And then you have a quarter of the electorate that feels incredibly disenfranchised right now, and they want the government to do a lot more for them and be more involved in their lives. And then you got a whole range of other things, and I think to some extent, the missing voice in all this has been nothing really from the Silicon Valley in all this. It's all like, you know, kind of extreme points of view to some extent, where it's been places that are, you know, just by virtue of being kind of early in the primary process. So one of the things we thought would be fun would be to kind of give a voice to the Valley and give a voice to the people in this room.
I think it's important that people in the Valley have the perspective of the people outside the Valley. And as myself, I've traveled both to Iowa and Nevada and met a lot of people whose lives are going to be vastly impacted by the outcome of this election, whichever way it goes. And what I say to my friends back here is, yeah, our lives will be impacted, but guess what? Life is going to go on. Yeah, our tax rate will probably change. There'll be some inconveniences in business, but we have health care. You know, we're not facing deportation. You know, those types of things, and I think it's important for the Silicon Valley bubble to recognize what's happening outside.
Right now, unemployment, you can argue about the particulars, but it's pretty low. And the stock market, it's had a fantastic run for 8 years. So on those superficial numbers, things look pretty great. But this is an election completely marked by a theme of we've lost our way. Something's wrong here.
For us, we can look at the numbers and say, yes, things are getting better, but for a lot of people, they don't actively feel like things are getting better. And that's what Trump is, more than Trump, that's what a lot of these candidates are tapping into. The perception that while things are getting better, it's getting better for other people, not us.
They know that they're going to grow, you know, that they're going to probably grow much older than their parents before them. They know that they're going to need vastly more savings than their parents had. They know that their children are going to compete in a world in which they're not going to have long-term employment guaranteed to them.
While we have this idea of change is a very good thing, for other people they've experienced it as change can be very good, get a BMW plant, or very bad, someone could lose the job they thought they'd have for a lifetime.
Did business people, corporations decide that patriotism isn't even important anymore? And they just left these people and moved their jobs to wherever they were cheapest and didn't give a damn. The business schools don't care. It's about a world economy. It's not about the United States.
Because America was a place where everybody was supposed to be equal. Everybody was supposed to be given the same chance. It was a place where, you know, you just were given the same opportunity. And that's, you know, that's clearly been proven to sadly not be true.
Elections in this country are about one thing. People want something better than they just had. So if you're an incumbent or you're a challenger, if you're a challenger, you're going to tell the electorate that what you have now is not good. And if you're an incumbent, you're going to say what you just had is just the starting of what you're going to get.
Something's different because like Donald Trump hasn't been a serious contender for president before. I wonder if it's because in this last presidential election there have been some real milestones, like big decisions or changes that have been made, like some of the healthcare changes, some of the things around gay rights that have been big changes. Like, I'm from small town Ohio. People in my town don't support universal healthcare and generally are not favorable towards gay rights.
The author of Dilbert, who's been calling this from the very beginning because he's a trained hypnotist. And he sees the way to say he's never seen anybody who can execute kill shots and just sell forward through things like he can. His personality is so big and he has such incredible name recognition. And Bernie Sanders is sort of similar on the left with his ability to stoke people in popular places where there's echo chambers like Reddit.com, which was popular with Obama.
A ton of people, specifically young people, get their news from places like Reddit. And on Reddit, and the internet in general, I mean, people are just downright vitriolic, and that's becoming the new norm.
Things that are said that we would never think would ever stand at the stage of a presidential election. And that's what seems to have changed. It seems to me that in this election, there's that norm or that vitriolic
element that you're describing has transcended it just being about the substance. When we have candidates saying other candidates are ugly, or when we talk about someone sweating too much.
Until today, only 1.2 million people had actually voted in Republican primaries. All of this hype is around 1.2 million people. It's all been, so you do have to ask the question about how much of a role does the media play, how much of a role does now social media play. What you're hearing is the loudest voices are being reported on. But there's a bunch of people who are kind of quietly saying, okay, I just gotta wait till the national election and hopefully I'll also go away.
The last 2 weeks have gone from Hillary's going to kill Trump to Trump actually has a real chance of winning.
Republicans, me included, people who watch this stuff pretty closely, came up with a list of 1 million reasons why Trump wouldn't win. He had a ceiling of so-and-so percent. That ceiling kept going up. This voter demographic wouldn't vote for him. He wins Hispanics by like 20% in Nevada, for example. So there were just so many reasons, logical reasons, borne out by past stats, that would seem to imply that Trump would have lost the nomination or would have dropped out by now. But for some reason, and I have thought about this a lot, and I don't really have a good answer yet, all of the logical reasons that people like me have put up for why Trump should not be leading or should not be the front runner in this race have not been true, have been rendered completely false by all current results. I'm remaining cautiously optimistic because even after Super Tuesday, there is, if you look at the delegate math, a clear path for Rubio to get the nomination, but it involves a number of candidates suspending their campaigns, namely Cruz, sometime before March 15th.
And I'm not a Trump supporter, but I think Trump has a real likely shot at the nomination, and I think he actually has a real shot at winning. And if you listen to Trump's stump speech, it's pretty stupid for educated people. It's, I'm a winner, and I can win with the winners because I win. Whoa. But for a lot of
And the
people,
polls say.
and the polls say
I'm winning.
And so you should vote for me because I'm winning. And you know what? A lot of people go, wow, finally, I'm winning.
This is where, I'm like right with Chris. I full on believe that Trump could win this election. Like, I definitely think he's going to win the nomination, and I think he could win the election.
And our youngest child has asked for us to move back to Amsterdam when it happens, so the house will be for sale.
Okay,
So
Jim, go ahead.
I'm willing to go on record and say there's a possibility that Trump may actually be remembered one of the greatest presidents in U.S. history. I've been on record since last summer that I think Trump's going to win the general election.
Foreign policy. So he sees himself as a deal maker and a showman. And so those are quite interesting skill sets for escalation, shows of force, deception, things like that. And if he's good at those things, then you might very well be right. But if Putin is like, I can throw this guy with the first move on a judo mat, and he's bad at those things, then that's a problem. That's a big problem.
You look at the other side and you think, that's so crazy, there's no way they win, and then you get complacent. And the only way Democrats win is when they get to the polls.
So that's where I'm at. I'm a Republican. I've been a Republican my whole life. And for the first time in my life, I'm thinking a Democrat looks pretty reasonable to me. That one of the things I don't understand about the Republican Party is the complete ignorance for science. And I live in a world where climate change matters.
This is the issue with the Republican Party is over the last 8 years, they've failed to make advancements for the party to actually tackle these issues, which a lot of people care about. And instead of trying to advance the party and accept some of these changes, they instead just bash Obama and the Democrats and say we're doing everything wrong, and they're still trying to grasp onto like the core fundamentals of what they believe.
Yeah,
and it's just been really frustrating.
I'm on the fence about Bernie versus Hillary. I could go either way on a number of issues. I'm going to vote for Bernie to signal to Hillary not to move toward you, just to point a finger at, not to move toward the moderate Republican, which I think she could do with Trump. If it's Trump and Hillary, I think what Hillary could do is say, hey, let me reach over here a little bit to my right and grab some of those moderate Republicans who don't know where to go.
She needs to do.
Which she has to do. She doesn't have to, though.
It's a very, very different perspective for a large majority of the country. And I think the appeal that somebody like Trump has is that what he's saying is taking us back to the good old days. He wants to make us great again. He wants to make us the same way we were when we were little kids.
Listen, here's a job spec. The person has to be global. They have to manage a large number of people. They have to negotiate large number of agreements with wide numbers of people. They have to be able to work and compromise to get stuff done. You go through this whole laundry list, and if we hired Spencer Stewart to identify candidates for the President of the United States, Donald Trump would be a failed businessman with a really bad attitude and unable to compromise truly, and he wouldn't be in the top 100. By the way, and any senator, we say, hey, nice job, get a real job, get a job where you're a governor, right? Get a job where you were vice president, right? And I'd say if you've been a CEO, that might be interesting too. And frankly, I say the same thing on the Democrat side. I mean, I'm sort of stunned that where we are now is if we did an actual search, no one on either side would be in the top 100 in America. That we would say, so there's something I'm really concerned about with democracy. Being qualified is sort of irrelevant, right? But Kasich, I respect what you were saying. I'm not a Kasich fan, but he's incredibly competent. He's a phenomenal track record. He's a moderate, and he doesn't have a chance.
Right, so if the Republicans had been smart and only had 3 people in the debates, one of them was Kasich, one of them was Rubio, one of them was Cruz, and they cut everyone out like the Democrats did, we would have President Kasich in about 6 months. Right? Like Kasich would have won in a landslide if they had just decided up front to limit the field the way Democrats had. But it's kind of troubling the way Democrats limited the field and didn't let anyone else in, right? And so I think this candidate search that you're speaking to is part of the point, right? Does anyone remember that the League of Women Voters used to run the debates? Now we let the media companies make a deal with the parties to run the debates, and they literally cut Lessig out. When Lessig started to meet their rules, they changed them, and they cut him out of the debate. We don't even remember what his issue was anymore, right? No one even remembers his name now, right? So I think the lack of democracy when it comes to picking the candidates is why we will have another white president, but it's also very troubling. I think if we actually democratized it, and by the way, if voting were a holiday, and people actually got paid the day that they had to go and vote, and 180 million people showed up to vote instead of 130 million, which was huge when Barack Obama won, a lot more people would show up, and crazy people probably wouldn't get much traction, because there'd be too many other people who are just normal, ordinary Americans who say, this guy's crazy, and they vote for the reasonable person.
Right.
And right now, what we had wasn't quite democratic. We had the Democrats decide that we only allow these 3 people to talk. The Republicans kind of had a clown car to distract you from the fact. They thought it would shake out the way they had planned, and it didn't. It blew up in their faces. They let a very sly candidate get between them and their voters because they took their voters for granted and assumed that their views were their voters' views.
Yeah.
And now they're paying the price.